everyone. Good morning. My name is Debbie Rosen, and this is Lindsay Toms, and we are from the Study Pro. We are an executive function and study skills center. And do not worry if you are unfamiliar with any of those terms, because we're here to share a bit about those terms today and how executive functions actually can help build study skills and reduce a lot of the stress that you're seeing in school. So why we wanted to share this with you today was we've wanted to demystify what executive functions are. That is a term that a lot of people hear a lot about, and they think they might recognize some of those challenges with their kids. But we are here to demystify it and help you understand why understanding executive functions is so important. The bottom line, really, and we'll give you a sneak peek at the answer, is the fact that when you understand what executive function skills are, then you're better off at identifying the skills that we need to fill in your students' toolbox and help them really to build the muscles of things like initiation or planning and organization, those areas that they may not be fully developed but are really critical for them with their school success and based on the demands that especially middle and high school bring to students. When we understand the underlying challenges of any situation or any overcoming certain barriers, then we understand how to resolve those issues. And so rather than feeling that our kids may be unmotivated or not feeling as though they care that much about school, it's probably most likely a barrier that they have within their executive functions and they're really just underdeveloped. So we not only want to talk a little bit about what those executive functions are, how we can help to build some of those skills, but also the fact of how we might want to approach our students so that they're not as they're more open to speaking with us and to hearing what we have to say and not as defensive. So we're going to go ahead and get started by talking a little bit about what are some of the things we're seeing when our executive functions tanks are low, especially after this last year, but really any challenging school year, we see these kinds of situations here. Kids have a lot of challenge just figuring out what they have to do, staying focused on what they have to do, tracking their work, breaking the work down so that it feels a little bit more approachable. Many of us don't want to approach work that feels overwhelming to us. A lot of us don't run marathons because we think they're going to be too long. And in the case of our students, what's happening is a lot of kids feel that each assignment in itself is a marathon. And so they're having a hard time. And then what happens is there's a lot of avoidance. Sometimes kids start assignments and then they get stuck and they have difficult time managing their emotions and saying, you know what, I'm going to have a growth mindset and I'm going to try to learn from the fact that I don't understand or try different ways of understanding. And these are really all their things that are hard. And again, the great news is that they're all skills that we can help help students to develop. So what exactly are executive functions? That's really where we're going to start turning this over to Lindsay, and she's going to go through these. So I won't go through all of these in detail because each one of these will have a little bit of introduction to. But really the bottom line is that when we wake up in the morning, we have a view of what our day looks like. We can do things like manage our day backwards. If we know we have to go someplace after work, what is it we have to bring? We know that we have a big project due. How are we going to start breaking that down and do certain chunks of it? We're doing a lot of these things automatically. It's really about, the skills that we develop as adults to get things done. And we often talk about the fact that these skills, because they're developmental, they don't really start, you don't really start seeing them in our students until at least 12 or 13. And then they're developing as the kids are maturing and well into their 20s and even 30s. And so do not be dismayed or do not be discouraged if some of these aren't developed with your students. You'll probably find that they're variable, that maybe your student is better at planning, but maybe not in executing or initiation. And so to go through these a little bit more and to help you understand them so we can identify some of the challenges we're seeing with our students, we're going to go ahead and turn this over to Lindsay. Oh, actually, I wanted to share a little bit about the difference between executive function and study skills, in that executive functions are really that base that allow us to use our study skills. And it's really not as important that you understand which one, that time management is a study skill and that planning and organization is an executive function skill. But it is important to know that as kids go through middle and high school, we really do want to make sure that they are exposed to actually how to do some of these things, like specifically how to take notes, how to study actively. What we find is that many students think that studying is really just about reviewing their notes, or self advocacy is just asking, if they, a question to the teacher, but there's really so much more to it. It's really critical, as we know, when the process part of school starts to overwhelm the content piece, meaning how important it is to chunk down a longer piece of work, or how important it is to manage multiple priorities when you're working, that these types of skills are taught explicitly. And so there is a difference, of course, between executive functions and study skills. And this is really where those come in play. And as I said, the executive function skills are really where the base. So if I can't inhibit or initiate, I can't really even use those study skills to manage my time or to study actively. And it really does take explicit instruction and practicing of these skills in many cases, so that we can take the actions that are important for us to be successful in school. And as we turn now truly to Lindsay to talk a little bit more about these executive functions, I think it's important for us to note that when I refer to the process of school and the content, there really is a difference, because the content is how well can I understand the math and the history, or the English or language arts. That's the piece of, that maybe if there's not quite an understanding, you would want a tutor. The difference between that and executive function is I might not even get to that math if I have a trouble initiating or planning or chunking, and that does end up in avoidance. And so the process piece of school is really how am I planning and managing everything I have to do, prioritizing everything I have to do, and that often leads up to the content or interacts with the content when I'm doing things like test taking and active studying for how I take my tests. So I will go ahead now and turn this over to Lindsay, and we'll talk a little bit about what happens when the process requirements overtake the content piece, and we really are having challenges with, how can I even get started and move through my work. So Lindsay, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Yeah, Debbie, exactly what you were saying. So that there is a difference. As our brain develops, there's a difference between your content knowledge and your process ability. So literally speaking, your brain develops back from the back to the front, and your frontal lobe is the last part of your brain to develop. It's developing all through adolescence. It starts around 10, 11, really hitting some peaks, and then it doesn't fully mature until your early and mid 20s. So as that is developing, we're in school, right? We're in middle and we're in high school. We have to use our frontal lobe. So the back part of our brain is where we know what we have to do. That's the content piece. And then the frontal lobe, where those executive functions are, is the ability to do what you know. So what you'll often hear from your students is, I know I need to study. I know I need to study. It's not that they don't know that they need to, or they don't have the motivation to do so. It's, do they have the ability and the skills to do so? So what we're big believers of is, as that brain is maturing, students can learn how to use strategies to fill that maturational gap that's happening when they need to actually use them. So we're going to go through some of those, and on the next page here, we're going to first point out, because it's very important to point out why we're teaching you this and why we're explaining what executive functions are, is because it is groundbreaking. When you know it, you can praise it. It's very, very easy to see when executive functions are going wrong, and it can be tempting to think that they're lazy, that they're unmotivated, that they're just wasting their time, that they don't care about their grades. Well, what I'm going to tell you is it's the exact opposite is true. They do, but they don't have the abilities yet to demonstrate some of those executive function uses, so they need strategies. If we come from the place of thinking they're lazy, we can try to incentivize or penalize when we see a grade that is less than their abilities and less than what they're capable of. We can ground them, we can take away their phone, but then somehow that missing work is still there, or somehow that test score is still looking the same. So we want to find the right approach and finding the right strategy to meet their needs, which for most of our students are those developing executive function skills. So to go a little bit more in detail, we're going to show you exactly what these might look like, and some of these are going to be pretty familiar. As I go through these executive functions, I want you to keep in mind that really it is about your brain's ability to manage three things. It's your brain's ability to manage your thoughts, about your feelings, and then manage your actions. So I'm going to say that again. You keep in mind that as we discuss these executive functions, it's all around our brain's ability to manage your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. So let's take a look at a couple of these. First one, initiation. As Debbie was describing, getting started can be a big hurdle for a lot of our kids. So it's not that they don't know that they don't have homework. It's not that they don't know that that paper is due on Friday. It's that, can I initiate? How do I get started? So some of these might look familiar. I work at the last minute because I have these binge sessions. For students who have initiation challenges, they don't trust their initiation. They've been let down by their initiation before. They've had all intent in the world to work on that outline on Thursday, and then Thursday came and it didn't happen. So they've built a habit of binging all of that work in one time. It's not that they don't know what they have to do, it's their ability to get started on that. So just chunking, which is one of those study skills that we refer to, they need to use an initiation strategy to actually follow through on that chunk. Maybe it's putting on music. Maybe it's setting a timer for 5 minutes and just seeing how far we get. Maybe it's just simply putting the title on a Google Doc. Just seeing that blank page can be really overwhelming and intimidating. So we want to teach kids the strategies on how to initiate and not just assume just because they know it, they can do it. And kind of going very, very hand in hand with initiating is shifting. Shifting is your brain's ability to shift from one thought process to another, having that mental flexibility. So some of these might look familiar. I can get stuck on a problem or part of a project. Or I don't like when things change, when plans change. We had to do a big shift this time last year in March. And that was a big change for our kids. Now we might be having some challenges with shifting to a new routine and a new schedule. We often see this as a barrier with projects or papers because I might feel really confident about my research, but I might get stuck on that stage. So I need a strategy to help shift off of that. How do I know when I'm done researching? How do I know when I'm done? When we have a target and a bullseye and keep to that, then we can use an initiation strategy on the next part of that project. But we don't want to assume it's just, hey, they don't want to do the paper. It's not that. It's that they need a strategy to help shift from researching to outlining. And then going with this next one, this is a big one, I would say, for that time management that Debbie was referring to. Can we manage our time? Well, first we have to manage our ability to inhibit. Can I ignore the distractions around me? Can I resist a temptation that's happening? So I've said this a lot in the past few months, but this one is almost unfair to talk about right now, especially with distance learning and students learning from home. We all, adults included, are having a hard time with inhibition. I might find myself scrolling on my phone more often. I might be switching from tab to tab. I might be easily distracted if I hear a ping on my phone. So I might know I need to ignore it, but do I have the skill set to do so yet? Remember that it's developing, so it can be incredibly frustrating when you walk by your student, they're supposed to be doing their homework, and you see them scrolling on their phone or Snapchatting their friends. Now, there can be two approaches. It can be, I'm taking this phone and I'm banning it forever and you're never getting it back until you're 21. Well, that doesn't actually help them learn those inhibition skills. So having them actually use the strategy to say, hey, how can we inhibit? And one of the biggest takeaways I hope you have from this part is short little spurts. Knowing when they don't have to inhibit is a strategy. Knowing that they will have time on their schedule to hang with friends, chat with friends, use their phone uninterrupted. That's why a lot of our kids are staying up really, really late. So that's their uninhibition time that they can actually use all their devices the way they want and not have to be restricted and inhibit. But we want to teach them some strategies for, especially when they're in homework or in class, to actually inhibit. Out of sight, out of mind is the best. Having it plugged in, any device plugged in, away from their field of vision. Having grayscale turned on their phone so they don't get as much of a dopamine fix whenever they do check it. And limiting their tabs. So sometimes restricting and blocking websites isn't as effective as maybe just having a limit of 3 tabs at a time. So then that they can stay focused on what they need to at the moment and not be tempted to even just go back and check their email multiple times. So we'll go to the next one here, this emotional control. So this is when you might see it for a student who has some perfectionistic tendencies, who might get stuck trying to make it right or perfect. So I'm going to remind you here and think about your executive functions, ability to manage your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. So when we see emotional control, it starts with your thoughts. What are the thoughts I'm having around this paper? Is it, if I don't find this perfect source, my teacher's going to think I'm a failure, I'm going to disappoint my parents, I'm going to fail, I'm never going to get into college, no one's ever going to want to employ me. It could go on and on and on. But it starts with those thoughts that we're having. And then those feelings are overwhelm, disappointment, sadness, frustration. And then I'm not able to actually move off of and start that paper. I might feel stuck. That's where my emotional control strategies come into play. It's never about suppressing emotions. It's about acknowledging what feelings we're having and tracing them back to a thought. What thought might be getting in the way of achieving this goal? I gotta find that perfect source. I gotta find that perfect clip art. Or this can be a barrier to reaching out to teachers, to seeking help. Hey, if I let my parents know that I haven't started on that paper yet and I'm feeling overwhelmed, they're gonna think that I'm lazy. They're gonna think I don't care. Those can be some of the barriers that our students are having with emotional control. So the first step, and a lot of the strategies we use here, are about them recognizing their emotions and then using strategies to regulate them. So even think about the old school stress balls, something to play with in their hands, a stretchy band around the legs of their chairs to kick on. Having regular breaks for breathing, mindfulness, are really effective because they're proactive, not when they're reactive. When we notice students' emotions kind of hitting that peak level, it never really helps to get in their face and say, hey, why don't you take 5 deep breaths? Never works. In the history of being told to calm down, no one's ever really calmed down when they're told to. So we want to use strategies here that are proactive. Getting time outdoors, connecting, journaling is a really effective strategy here too. So we'll talk about the next one here too, because with working memory, this is one that's very much impacted, especially with online learning. It is your ability, your brain's ability to hold on to information and use it. So I often call this the what was I doing memory, that I started to do something, I have it in my mind, and then I go to use it, and then poof, it's gone. It's like I never happened. That's why notes, sticky notes, are extremely effective, because it offloads that information. So you're not dependent on your frontal lobe to hold on to that information. So we often see this with students in directions. So they read the directions, now they have to go use it. Can they scroll down that page and still retain the 3 parts of that question that they're supposed to answer? Probably not. That's a lot to ask of their frontal lobe right now, what's developing. So we want to use strategies that help them pick apart the directions, highlighting it, picking out the key words, copying and pasting the directions into the heading of a paper, especially a Google Doc. So when you scroll to the second page of the Google Doc, oh, it's still in the heading. I still get to see it. Offloading it, putting on a Post-it note, even if it's remembering directions. If you tell your kids as parents, you tell your kids, like, go upstairs, I want you to go, it's time for soccer practice, make sure to get your cleats, your shin guards, and don't forget your uniform. It's hanging up in the closet. And then it's time to leave, you're walking out the door and they only have their cleats. That's probably happened to many of you many times before. So they need a strategy there. So there's 3 things you're getting from your room. Hold up your fingers. 1, 2, 3. How many things? 3. So as they go in, they might be going, okay, what's the first thing, the second thing, and the third? So that information is anchored to something external. That's what all the working memory strategies are. It's taking that information and externalizing it and anchoring it to something else. So then when they need to go use it, they can retrieve it easier. So on to the next one here, this self-monitoring. So this is your ability to track your performance, monitor your performance. Recognize, remember my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions. How are those impacting my goals? How are my actions impacting my goals? Am I rushing through my papers? Am I rushing through a test, not checking over my work? I don't like to proofread for mistakes. And I'll acknowledge why this is a challenge for a lot of our students. Is because think about all those executive functions we just referred to. Think about initiation, thinking about inhibition, thinking about emotional control. So say I'm taking a test. It was hard to initiate on that. I had to inhibit my phone going off or other tabs on my computer that are going on. My little brothers might be screaming in the other room. I'm inhibiting. Then I actually have to manage my emotional control of, what if I do? I really need to pass this test. I really need to bring my grade up. Now I finished it. I feel really great. I got a dopamine boost from finishing that test. Now you want me to go back and self-monitor and do all of those actions again and use all of those skills again? It's a real big challenge. So what we want to do is make students aware of this and then use strategies to self-monitor as they go versus at the end. We are very transparent with our students and we say, this is what we're working on. And this is why it's a challenge. Having them be able to reflect on it and then say, now, if you were to check over 25 questions all at once, how likely are you to self-monitor? Not so much. How likely would you be if you were checking over 5 questions? Much more likely. It's a smaller chunk. So we might teach strategies when they're about to take a test. You count up how many problems and just say, okay, every 5 I'm going to stop and check. If I was using a paper test, I might draw a line and have a highlighter so that I can remind myself to stop and check then. Setting a timer even, just saying every 15 minutes, I'm going to stop, I'm going to do a little body check, I might roll my shoulders, I might take a deep breath in, I might plant my feet in the ground, just becoming more aware of what I'm doing in that moment. Checking over papers and proofreading is really effective when somebody else can be there with us. Our brain doesn't even catch some of the mistakes that we make. Putting it into Google Translate, putting a little short text into Google Translate from English to English allows it to be read aloud, or using a screen reader can actually help us catch some of those errors. Making it novel and fun and making it specific means that student's more likely to self-monitor. If we just say, hey, did you check over that test? They'll be like, yeah, I did when I turned it in. If we said, okay, did you actually check for the first 5? Those were multiple choice. Did you have 5 circles for multiple choice? If you're making it specific, then they're more likely to be able to take action and use this skill here. And so after we've self-monitored, we also need this skill of planning and organizing. This is what you might think of that forward thinking. It's about knowing what's coming in the future. And the connection I see in some of these bubbles that you see here on the screen is probably very familiar to us as parents, but what we as adults have is this fully developed frontal lobe. So we can see things further into the future. Students, even through high school into a senior in high school, are about a 2-week timeline that they're able to see into the future and plan for that. We can see further. So what that looks like for us, trying to support our kids, is we can see the quote-unquote danger coming down the track. It's like a train coming down the track. We see that paper, it's due on Friday. We remind our students, hey, remember you got that paper due on Friday, you got that paper due on Friday. And they'll, yeah, you, and they are aware, I know I have that paper on Friday. But do I have the skill set to actually do it, to chunk it out, plan it? Do I know the steps that I need to take before actually initiating? We do have a lot of students who like to go straight into that drafting stage, and it's just a one and done, just writing it. But there are steps. I need to have some research here. I need to develop my research and organize my research before I can even come up with a thesis, right? And then outline it and know where my evidence is going to fit into that paper. That's the planning skill. You even see this when students are telling a story. If their story is disjointed, it might be all over the place. They start at the end, and they add something from the beginning, and then the middle, it's all a little disconnected. This is that planning and organization skill here. So again, we want to back up. We have the ability to see into the future. We see that train coming down the track. So instead of just reminding them, we want to help them actually use that planning skill. So you might ask them, okay, what's the first thing we're going to start with? See what they come up with. But this next one, this materials organization, so thinking about planning and organization, seeing upcoming dates and into the future, versus this is the management of your stuff. This is your things, your external environment. So I might B, losing things at school. Can't find things that we save on the computer. So right now we're in a very, very, very digital educational world, which is great because things can be stored digitally, but they need to be taught the skills on how to do that. Can I find that document that I started? Unfortunately, a lot of students have restarted assignments that they've gotten a quarter of the way done, halfway done, 3/4 of the way done, and then they can't find it and they need to restart from the beginning. It might look like a Google Drive that has 100 untitled documents with nothing in the name because they need to be taught that skill, taught how to name documents, how to keep it consistent when you name them. And then another big one is I do it, but then I forget to turn it in, or I forget where to turn it in. Like, I thought it was done. I thought it was in the shared folder. Well, my teacher actually wanted me to email it, or my teacher wanted me to submit it through Google Drive. So they need to be taught these skills here to maintain their physical stuff, which includes their digital materials. So we're big fans of what we call a reset day, where it's hard to keep up with your management every single day of the week, myself included. So what you can do is assign a reset day, a Friday afternoon that it's nothing else, no homework, no work time, except let's clear out your downloads folder. Let's clear out your desktop. Let's go look through your Google Drive. Are there any untitled documents that we can rename? The inboxes. We give emails starting in middle school, and then all of a sudden they have 3,000 unread emails, right? Because they're never taught those skills. What's important to keep, what can be recycled, and what might be saved for later. So using a reset day to help go through that little checklist of, did I clean my desktop? Did I clean my downloads folder? Did I clean my drive and my email? It's much easier to maintain your stuff on a weekly basis versus maybe once a year when it comes to the end of the year. So we tell you all of these because enable to see the need behind the behavior. So for us to come to a place where we are looking for the need and not assigning lazy or they don't care, because that doesn't give us a solution. Knowing what these executive functions are help us identify what that need might look like. And I'm sure there were some of those examples that you're seeing that were kind of nodding your head. So we often see the challenge, the symptom of these missing skills. So one of those being missing work. We see a lot of missing work in the grade book or on Google Classroom, not turned in, missing that big red alert. What could be missing here is a lot of these executive function skills. Planning, I knew what I had to do but didn't do it. That emotional control I referred to, initiating, getting started, and that working memory. Things are posted in so many places. Students really are encoding that they have done something because there's assignments that look similar. Think about math, there might be IXL assignments, Ed Puzzle assignments, there might be math space assignments. So there's all these different, which is good, novelty is good for the brain, but how are they tracking and remembering that they actually did it and submitted it if it's posted in different ways? They need a system there, they need a strategy. But what it's not, and what's important for parents to recognize, is that it's not a lack of motivation or laziness here. That doesn't give us the remedy. Same thing with low test scores. I referred to that self-monitoring, the not checking it over. Yeah, I might have rushed through, I might have missed part of the directions. We hear that often from students. Oh, I knew that one, and they get upset with themselves because they missed it. That emotional control. Test anxiety is proven to have an impact on test scores. There's also strategies and a focus, concentration. If you just worked on test taking and test anxiety strategies, test scores go up. Also that shifting, can I move on from one problem? I might get stuck thinking that this is the problem that's going to make or break my test, and then I miss the rest of the page. And then of course, those executive function skills need to be used to study. Am I taking notes in class? Do I have notes to refer to when studying? Am I actively studying or just rereading my notes like Debbie was referring to? And then do I have strategies to attack that test and use test taking strategies there? Again, don't want to, when that failed test grade comes back, assume it's because they're not trying. And then this last one, not paying attention in class. I say this as a teacher, and I say this as a teacher who's taught remotely. It is really hard to not jump to that last column, that it's this lack of motivation or caring or disrespect to the teacher. But that doesn't help. That doesn't help my students become more engaged in my class. Teaching them inhibition strategies, teaching them shifting strategies or working memory strategies. That is what's going to help them become more engaged in my class. And same with them at home or in school. So do I have a way of tracking multiple directions when they're giving? Even just like holding up a remember, like, hey, your teacher might say remember in class. Hey, remember, before you go, I want you actually to submit that Google Doc before you log off. Even just a little trick of like crossing your fingers is something we teach our students so that they can retain that information. So then they'll be like, why did I cross my, oh yeah, I have to turn in that Google Doc. Something, again, externalizing that information. But everything you see here on your screen, these purples, are designed to help you see that need behind the behavior so you can come from the solution orientation, this problem solving and problem seeking together versus just the assumption of lazy or not caring. So I'll kind of pass it over a little bit here to Debbie so we can look at some of those strategies that parents can help with when we're seeing some of those symptoms.
Thanks, Lindsay. So again, just to try to pick up where Lindsay left off, why we tell you all about what all of these executive functions is, again, so we can recognize how can we best help? How can our students, what are the skills that our students really need to work on? And oftentimes, we'll say these generic type of questions. Do you have homework? Have you started? What homework do you have? And again, if our students are having issues with initiation, if our students are having issues with emotional control or even some study skills like chunking work down, we're really not necessarily helping them to overcome the barriers that typically are there to start or know what homework they may have. So what we wanted to do was to think about an example. One thing that we see very commonly is that students just have a hard time starting. And, there are a lot of reasons for that. Before I kind of what's on the slide, think about the fact that what are your challenges when you have a hard time getting started with things? You don't quite understand it. Maybe you haven't looked at it closely enough. There's so many times that all we're really doing is helping students pop open assignment and look at it and see what the directions are. And they realize that big wall of awful that they've built in terms of how horrible they think it is really not as bad as they've made it up to be in their mind. Again, that kind of emotional control that Lindsay talked about. So what we have here is questions that we ask actually in our study skills course around initiation, and students really asking themselves, again, what is that need behind the behavior? What's the challenge, the barriers that I have? Is it, when I'm having a hard time starting as a student, is it because I really don't know what I have to do, because it's not worth enough points, because it's maybe too much, worth too many points? And so it's important really for our students to self-assess and again self-monitor and say what is really going on here, so that they can create the kind of start routine or solutions to the barriers that they're having. So for us, two of the things that we really help, we teach students that help them to get started, is planning, and also kind of how we're going to enter in. We call them on ramps, how we're going to enter into the assignment. And we think it's something that parents can do at home as well. And this text got really big, but it's important text, because one of the most important messages, again, that we want to share today is that to get started, it's not just about making a list, because a list itself isn't a plan. And we as adults, when we think about a big project we might have, even if we have something like making dinner tonight, or we have people coming over for dinner, we think that's our homework. Our homework is dinner. But if we have a lot of other things going on at work or in our daily lives, that might still feel overwhelming. What am I going to get? When am I going to go shopping? What do I have, or what do I need? What can I even fit into the time that I have? And so a list doesn't really provide a lot of the details in terms of how I can a path to move forward. So we really do need a plan. And what we want to do with a plan is to help to really be very specific about what that work is. Oh, okay, that homework in this case is spaghetti bolognese, or in the case of math, are these very specific questions, or in the case of this history paper, is these first chunks of this paper, because we're opening it up and we're reading and we're seeing exactly what it's taking. So really identifying versus just, oh, I have math to do. Okay, let's take a look and see what exactly you have. Oh, there's 5 problems. Oh, each 5 problems has 5 parts. Okay, now we can see how to chunk that down. Oh, 5 problems are pretty short and easy. They're all the same. Those are 2 different types of math piece of homework. And then again, that second piece, which I've already kind of alluded to, which is previewing the assignment, because that again reduces those emotional barriers that the kids may have and also helps you to be able to chunk things up. And then one of the strategies that we use at our center, and this plan here on the right of the screen is actually a plan that you can download. You can see the link there. We use it in our homework center, both in person and uh, remotely. It's alternating, and we're starting just like we would in, if we were working out, with something to warm up our brain. So what of these list of very specific assignments that we just put here, with the estimate of how long it each might take, would be the easiest for you, that's, could get your brain going. And of course, that's very personal for each student. Math might be really easy for one student, history for another, and then not for others. So usually we find that when we ask what roadblocks and what successes our kids have had at the end of this planning, one of the things they often say is this easy hard method. So starting with something easy to get their brain going. Then when their brain is, oh, okay, I'm kind of alert, I've had my cup of coffee essentially, not literally but figuratively, then I go to the thing that's the most stressful for me, the hardest high priority item. Why? Because what often happens with kids is that they punish their future selves, as we like to say, by waiting for these more challenging assignments to the end of the night, but then they're tired, etc. By making a plan, by being very specific, by knowing exactly what chunks they're doing, estimating how long, and then prioritizing this kind of easier, less stressful way, more stressful, harder way, and then alternating, then they've kind of put that aside and they're ready to do their work. Planning itself is an initiation strategy. And so one of the things, kind of bringing this back around, is again, if we know that students have challenges initiating, if we know they have some emotional control, some of these things really, we really are giving them skills to overcome those barriers by doing this type of a plan. And you can do that as well with your students. And then, as we said, now how do we get safely, we call them on ramps, how do we get safely into the traffic of the assignment without getting killed while we're doing that? Well, we said one of them is really just about previewing assignments. And, there are a lot of ways that you see here on the right for English and history. Sometimes it means going off-roading. Let's go in to look at other videos around that science topic that's not what we looked at in class, just to give us another way to get into the information and start taking some notes on that. For English, often we find that we're asked questions and we're not really finding a way to connect with the questions. Some of the things we do with our students here often is asking them, how are they connecting with the question? For example, how will you show up on campus if you're accepted, as we're working with them for high school or college applications? Well, what does that really mean, show up on campus? How do you connect with that in your personal life? How are you shown up? How have people shown up for you? So finding a way that they can connect. Just creating a very simple diagram. So I often will help students by creating almost like a spider diagram on a whiteboard. We have these whiteboards that you can easily get here that are personal whiteboards, and then you can be sitting with many of those next to the students. And students love these whiteboards because it's not as intimidating as starting to write a sentence where they feel like they have to have the sentence perfectly. So you just create, oh yeah, you have your topic, about what was the theme of this book. Okay, well, let's talk about what did you really take away from that? Then when you hear that, what might you ask? What other questions might you ask? And you almost make a spider diagram. So there's a lot of ways that we can help kids if we as parents, and if they'll allow us to help, which we're about to get on, if we as parents want to help them move forward and initiate. It's not by saying, what homework do you have? Did you do your homework? It's more about specifically, oh, what's going on in history today specifically that we have to work on? And oh, that would be really interesting to think about. I'd love to explore some topics with you around, I'd love to learn a little bit more about that government construct. And so here are other strategies that we talk about in our course. And of course, you can take a screenshot of this, pause this video. But really, a lot of them, it just comes down to, as Lindsay said earlier, finding a way to just get started in the smallest ways. Even if you're covering up the sheet, if there's a physical sheet and there's multiple problems, you're covering it up, you're saying, let's go with 5. You're writing the numbers of problems on here and they're erasing them every time they're doing one. A lot of ways to make it novel and to get kids started, because really, oftentimes it's really just about them getting started, and then they're able to finish on their own. And so as we move to the last piece, and we'll turn this back over to Lindsay, again, hopefully we better understand what executive functions are so that we can see the barriers that our students are having. Why? So we can have the right types of solutions and skills that we're building for our students to overcome those versus just, maybe assuming things, as we said, that they may be lazy. But now what do we do? So when we say watering the seeds, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that if we know that a student has a trouble with initiation or has trouble even with, reading. My daughter is not a natural reader. What do I do? Do I say, okay, you're reading 30 minutes, and then if she didn't read 30 minutes, go, oh my gosh, every time I ask you 30 minutes, you're not reading 30 minutes. If she read 5 minutes and that was more than she read the day before, that's the seed we want to water. Okay, what was easy about those 5 minutes? What was harder? Can we try to make it 10 minutes tomorrow? Meeting the kids where they are and watering every seed that is moving them in the right direction and helping that identifies to you can identify that is helping them build the skills that we're trying to move, and the approach that the direction that we're trying to move them in. And that's really what watering the seeds is all about. So to give some examples of how can we speak to our students and focus on strategies, not just results, and focusing on how to water the seeds, I'm going to turn it back over to Lindsay.
Yeah, kind of exactly what Debbie was saying. I'm just going to refer to a little bit of those initiation strategies. We don't have to be a trained expert to maybe recognize when our students are not starting. We might see them looking around the room, we might see them scrolling on their phone, we might see them picking up their nails. So as parents, we can approach the students with watering the seeds moments there to say, okay, I'm recognizing that this paper might be bothering you. Why don't we let's just try, what would a good title be for this paper? Let's just see if we can get something on this Google Doc. By coming from that approach that they see you as problem solving versus accusatory, like you need to finish this. That doesn't actually give them the solution. So when we're saying watering the seeds, we're saying give that specific use and praise for the executive function skills. If you remember what I pointed out earlier, that it's easy to recognize when they're going wrong, the goal of today is also for you to recognize when they're going right. So when we can reflect, hey, they got an A on a paper, that's fantastic, they deserve all the praise in the world there. You can say, what worked there? What studying did you find effective? Oh, that's great, because then you're watering and praising what you want to see repeated, them use of a strategy, them use of a skill. Then the repetition of the A's will come. You can say, oh, when that paper got done, what we don't want to say is, see, I told you it wouldn't be that hard. Or see, next time you're going to want to start earlier, right? That does not motivate them to use this executive function there. What you can do is validate is, oh, that must feel so great. Thank you for sharing that. What helped get over that hurdle? What helped get initiated? And then anytime you see them using a strategy, praise it. We all, believe it or not, we use 100 strategies to make it through our day. We don't even recognize it anymore. It's becoming habit. So what we want to do is start pointing it out for our students, for them too. Hey, that was a great idea to set that timer. Did you get more than you thought done in that 15 minutes than you first expected? Or I noticed you changed into the dining room. Did you find it easier to get your homework done when you were working in your dining room versus your room? Or I got started after school. Praise that. Studying over time, like, oh, it's so great to see you get started to study. And then chunking up that work. Oh, that must feel good to have that part of that paper done. They might not have the whole paper done, but praising some of those seeds along the way. And some more examples that we have here is that what we often do as parents, as I was saying, seeing that train coming down the track, and it seems like our students are just standing in the way of that danger. So what we want to do is often remind them, and we very innocently walk by or walk into their room and say something like, hey, did you study for that test yet? What that immediately does is put our kids on the defensive. They feel like you're trying to get them, catch them in doing something wrong. There's this implication that they're failing at something. And then we're like, oh, yes, I know, or I was just about to. Or yes, I'm going to. Why do you always bug me? Why do you always assume the worst of me? What we can do is come from a place where it's not just a yes-no question. The yes-no puts them on the defensive. But did you find anything interesting? when you were studying for that periodic table? Or I always wanted to know how to read it. I can't remember what that number in the top left-hand corner, what does that stand for again? And if they say I don't know, just be like, oh, I'm so glad you don't know either. Can we find out? Like, that's going to bug me all night if I don't know what that number is. Same thing with the did you finish your homework, right? We just very innocently, we might be thinking, oh, hey, I haven't checked in on Jack in a while. Let me get up and see how he's doing. I walk in, did you finish your homework? I'll almost, or yes, you might get some kind of flippant response. But you can try some of these things here. Like, did you hit any roadblocks with your homework tonight? Using some of that language. Or what's the first thing you could get started with that would help warm your brain up? That prompts them to have the same outcome that you're looking for. You're looking for them to reflect and share with you any experience that they're having with their homework. Good, bad, or ugly, that's what we want. As parents want to see that. So by asking that, hey, what's the first thing, you're actually prompting them to use that strategy Debbie was referring to earlier about getting started with something easy. But that can open the door to have that collaboration more. Because what I was describing is that putting them on the defensive when you ask a yes-no question, it feels like a you versus me problem. It feels like a parent versus the kid problem, versus the parent and the kid collaborating on the problem of initiation. The problem is initiation. The kid is never the problem. They need a strategy for initiation. So they can collaborate together when we use some of that language that can open up that dialogue. So we need a strategy to help initiate, not that you're lazy or you don't care about your grades. That's not going to be helpful in solving that problem. So we'll kind of end here with this nice little saying here as Debbie, I'll kind of let her wrap up a little bit of this, watering the seeds that we love so much.
Yeah, I think as it says here that, of course, the seeds that we plant and that we water, the seeds we tend to are the ones that bloom. So it's very hard as a parent, believe me, I've been through it all myself. It's very hard as a parent to not feel stressed when we know that something's due, or there's a test, or some reading isn't getting done, or things aren't getting done as the way that we, hope for our children that they will. And but remembering that we know if we're constantly being told the things that we're not doing as well, that is really what shape us. And we want to be shaped by those seeds of the things that we are doing well so that we can build on those. And we've really seen it work here with so many kids. We've had thousands of students, both in the study skills and one-on-one coaching, and in our homework center, where they've really been either missing work or just didn't know how to study, didn't know how to plan. Um, and by watering those seeds and helping them with the strategies, it really does it's life changing. And that's what we really want to see for your students and for, of course, the students that we work with. And so the wrap up really is that there are missing skills. The great thing about learning how to learn is that learning is a skill. Anything that you can practice and get better at is a skill. And that's really what learning is. And when kids are going from elementary to middle to high school, the requirements for them to have those process skills are increasing, tenfold, and they're not really actively learning those. And so they're being asked to do things that they just haven't learned yet. And so we're really trying to help them by introducing one skill at a time, introducing different strategies, and remembering that it's really about the strategies that they're going to use and the effort that will help them succeed. And the strategies are a lot of the things that Lindsay and hopefully I talked about in terms of getting started with just something very little, test taking strategies, self-monitoring strategies, etc. And that we really think that as parents, we can play an incredibly positive role in our students' lives by finding those things that they're doing right and helping them feel success even one seed at a time. And with that, we wanted to share that, the Study Pro, we lost our blue pro on the blue background, I guess there. The Study Pro does offer executive function coaching and study skills classes. We're doing that all summer. If you're watching this during the school year, we are coming to the end of the year. We have some more this year as well. And then we have both a remote homework center and our in-person homework center that's right here, that is open in a limited way. And so we would love to hear from you. We also do writing coaching because writing itself is very process oriented. And a lot of times kids benefit from understanding the pieces or the elements of writing, and how to organize and emotional control, a lot of things that Lindsay talked about that are really critical emotional executive functions around writing. So please reach out to us at info@thestudypro, or visit our website. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you. We hope that you took a lot away today about what executive functions are, what are some strategies you can use for your students, and then how you can speak to your students, hopefully, to start building some of those skills and their confidence. Thanks so much. We hope you enjoyed it, and see you soon.